So I am all for stealth drops of games because I don't know. I think it's exciting when something just comes out that you weren't expecting, hadn't been leaked, and hadn't been rumored. And today was definitely a very interesting day because Tomb Raider 2013, the game that was the reboot of the Tomb Raider franchise, randomly came out on the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2. No fanfare, no anything with it. It just kind of showed up and everyone was like, "Hey, here's Tomb Raider 2013 Definitive Edition." Now, I know this game did come out on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One as well with a definitive edition, but never on a Nintendo console. And I'm someone who actually likes this game. It kind of has a weird reputation in the grand scheme of things, but I think this game is actually super fun. So I decided to hop on over to the eShop, check it out on the Nintendo Switch 2. It's $19.99, but there is a little discount if you pick it up right now for $17.99. But I wanted to see how this game looks and plays. Like, it's been a very, very long time since I have played this game, but I remembered enjoying it back in the day. So does it still hold up, and how does the Switch 2 version perform? That's what we're going to talk about in this video today. So make sure you hit subscribe if you are new here. But let's talk about this game. So the Tomb Raider franchise is something that, I mean, I've been around it my entire life. Like, I remember getting Tomb Raider on the Sega Saturn, of all things, and being a huge fan of it. Lara Croft, obviously an icon, but as time went on, like, the games definitely sort of stagnated. Like, they just weren't as enjoyable as some of the previous entries in it. The franchise just got kind of out of control, and this Tomb Raider reboot was kind of bringing it back to a more primitive level. Essentially, I think this game is definitely more of a survival style game, which, I mean, not to say that Tomb Raider games, at least initially, were crazy on resources and stuff like that, but this is definitely more limited resources, all of that sort of stuff that goes along with it. I actually think the gameplay kind of reminds me a little bit of like The Last of Us, kind of like a precursor to The Last of Us, because you don't have a lot of weaponry. You don't have a lot of ammunition. Enemies and AI in the game are actually pretty well done, all things considered. This is a 2013 game, and I think it holds up pretty decently. Like I said, it's been a very long time since I've played this game, but some of the things that happen, even in like the early stages of the game, in terms of like gore and violence and language and stuff like that. Like, this is a dark and gritty Tomb Raider game, and I think it still holds up pretty well. Like all things considered, I think the story of the game is interesting. The fact that it's not just Laura being all sorts of crazy and stuff like that. There is a sense of dread in this environment while you're learning about the enemies, why these people are hunting you, why these people don't like you, seeing your squad mates get into the different positions that they get into in the unfortunate situations. It's a story that definitely still feels relevant, and I think is still an enjoyable thing. Of course, you have to talk about gameplay, and like I said, your limited resources here, and there is a leveling system that also works within this game as well. As you take out enemies or different sorts of creatures in the environment, you are constantly leveling up, and you get different skill points. You basically can then take those skill points and put them into different places however you see fit for your character and your play style. Do you want to look at resource management to where you could take out an enemy and then get more resources off of the body? Do you want to do this, that, or the other? It's up to you in sort of how your play style is. There's definitely a very strong stealth element to it, but I do feel like there is at least enough freedom to make it feel like, okay, well, I can mess around with different stuff. I can tinker with different stuff. There are different collectibles that you can find in the environments as well. Once you unlock a camp, you can actually fast travel to a previous camp should you want to check out things there. It's all very well done. There's no sorts of like crazy weaponry and stuff like that. It's all sort of rooted in a more realistic style, which I think is cool. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. Not every game has to be super over the top. The jumping does feel, well, rather floaty at times in the game. But I think overall, you know, the gameplay is still really well done. And I think some of that trickles down because of the AI. I think the AI is pretty well done. You know, they know when to, I'm playing on the normal difficulty, but they know when to go into cover. You know, if you startle them and they see you and you don't take them out in enough time, they'll shoot a flare up into the air to signify that they need backup, and then backup will start to come to take you out. Very impressive, especially for the time frame that this game came out in. And once again, kind of has a little bit of a Last of Us feel to it. Now, one of the problems with the gameplay, but it's not a problem for me personally, but I think some people it will bother, is the fact that there are quite a few quick time events where you got to do a button press at the right time and you don't know what that button is going to be. Like, even in the early stages of the game here, like, I had some issues with, you know, oh, I didn't press the right button in time because, you know, the frickin' Xbox controller is different than the Switch 2 one. I get the buttons mixed up. Not a huge deal, but it is something. Like here, you could see I'm having to tap the Y button and stuff like that. I know there's a lot of people that don't like that. Control-wise, the game has the standard controls, but the Switch 2 version actually has gyro. The Switch 2 version actually has mouse support. Now, I did not try out mouse support. I was not super interested in mouse support in this game. I don't really see how it would, you know, potentially add to the experience, but it is nice that it is there. You know, it's always good to have options and stuff like that. Now, as far as the graphics of the game are concerned, they call it a definitive edition, but I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, because there are some good things and there are some questionable things. Good things include, the main thing is that this game runs at 60 frames per second on the Switch 2. And I think that's very important. You know, even the definitive edition on the PS4 fluctuated and stuff like that. I haven't really seen any sort of fluctuations that I have noticed. Obviously, I don't have a frame rate reader or anything like that, but you can see, I mean, there's a lot of effects going on here. The frame rate is fine. And, you know, when enemies have come to join up with the other enemies because I screwed something up, you know, nothing crazy happened. Everything was fine with it. So from that perspective, it's good. You know, I think the lighting looks good. The character animations look good. You know, you know, watch this dude fall. Like, that's a pretty solid animation for an enemy plummeting to his demise. But there is something that I notice quite a bit, and it's like a weird checkerboard thing. Sometimes it's in the distance when you're looking. Sometimes it's when you're looking at something up close. But if you move a little bit, it'll go away. It doesn't happen all the time, but now that I've seen it a couple of times, I'm always kind of looking for it. And that definitely needs to be something that is cleaned up here. You know, it's a decent looking game. Obviously, it's an older game, but it's a decent looking game, even still by modern standards. But that little checkerboard thing, it just rears its ugly head. And it's just like you see these random dots of like a grid pattern where a texture is supposed to be. And then like when you look at it differently, then you get the proper texture. I don't know. Aspyr did this. We all know how Aspyr is. So, you know, hopefully that's something that can be cleaned up here. Now, as far as content is concerned, you're obviously getting the full base game, but there was a surprise. Honestly, with a lot of these games that have these definitive editions or remasters or essentially just a re-release, what is something that is always left off? If the game had a built-in multiplayer component, that's not going to be in the game. They're charging it $20 or $18 as it stands right now for just the single-player experience. Well, hold your horses, pal. Put the horse back in the barn, because this game actually has the built-in multiplayer. And you know what? It's kind of fun. Like, I'm not good at it. I'm not good at the base game because, you know, God almighty, it's been a long time since I played this. But this is actually pretty fun. There's different game modes. This is just a casual free-for-all. There's team-based stuff. You're leveling up. You can level up weapons. You can unlock new characters at certain levels as well. You know, back in the day when your multiplayer was included in the single-player game. So, you know, I think that's a nice little addition. It's fun to play. It's not something you're going to get super competitive with. I don't know. You might because you're a psycho. But it's fun. You know, it's decent. I was pleasantly surprised to see the multiplayer in here. Overall, you know, I still think the core game itself is still really good. It has always been an enjoyable game for me. Seeing it come out on the Switch too is something cool. I do think that there are some graphics that need to be cleaned up, though. That checkerboarding is super annoying. You've probably seen it in this video as well. And it does kind of take away from the game a little bit for me personally when you're, you know, trying to get sucked into this world and all these characters and stuff. But, you know, also in the same breath, for 20 bucks, you're getting a great single-player campaign. You're getting a multiplayer campaign as well. You know, if you've played this game to death or you've played the game recently, obviously there's no point in picking it up, but I'm having fun with it. You know, it looks decent enough. There's room for improvement, but the performance is solid, you know, at 60 frames. And I think that the gameplay still holds up very well. It's still a super fun game. I was assuming that dude was going to turn around, but I got lucky. It's still a super fun game, and if you've never played it or you haven't played it in a while, might be worth checking out the Switch 2 version. Let me know what you think of this game in the comment section down below, though. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. Be sure to check out the other video from today, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.